I remember the day I proposed to Sarah like it was yesterday. We were at her favorite restaurant, a small Italian place overlooking the bay. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. And when I got down on one knee, her eyes lit up with tears of joy. She said yes before I even finished asking the question. That was 8 years ago, and I thought we had built an unbreakable bond, a marriage that would withstand anything life threw at us. My name is Daniel, and this is the story of how my seemingly perfect marriage crumbled before my eyes, and how I finally found the strength to walk away. As we continue, if you are new to my channel, kindly hit the subscribe button and let me know where you're watching from. If you've already subscribed to my channel, thank you. I truly appreciate your support. Now, let's get into the story. Sarah and I met in college. She was studying marketing, and I was pursuing my degree in software engineering. We were introduced by mutual friends at a campus party, and there was an instant connection. She had this infectious laugh that could light up a room, and when she smiled at me, it felt like time stood still. We dated for 3 years before getting married, and those years were filled with adventures, deep conversations, and plans for our future together. After graduation, we both landed good jobs in the city. I worked for a tech company developing software solutions for businesses, and she joined a marketing firm. We bought a modest house in the suburbs, a two-story colonial with a small yard where we talked about our future children playing. Life seemed perfect, or so I thought. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We traveled together, hosted dinner parties for friends, and supported each other through career advancements and setbacks. Sarah was always my biggest cheerleader, and I was hers. We were that couple that others looked at with envy, the ones who seemed to have it all figured out. But as they say, appearances can be deceiving. Looking back, there were subtle changes in our relationship that I chose to ignore. Small red flags that I dismissed because I didn't want to face the possibility that something was wrong. Sarah started working late more often, claiming big projects and demanding clients. Her phone became an extension of her hand, and she would quickly turn it away when I walked into the room. Weekend getaways with the girls became more frequent, and when she returned, she seemed distant, as if part of her was still somewhere else. I remember the night I first felt that knot of suspicion in my stomach. We were having dinner at home, and Sarah's phone kept buzzing with notifications. She was unusually protective of it, keeping it face down on the table and checking it only when she thought I wasn't looking. When I asked who was texting her so late, she brushed it off, saying it was just work emails. "You know how Jessica gets when she's stressed about a campaign," she said with a forced laugh. "She's sending me ideas at all hours." I nodded and tried to believe her, but something felt off. That night, as Sarah slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, a growing unease settling over me. Was I being paranoid, or was there something she wasn't telling me? Weeks passed, and the distance between us grew. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly became stilted and superficial. Our intimate moments became less frequent, and when they did happen, they felt mechanical, as if she was simply going through the motions. When I tried to talk to her about it, she blamed stress and exhaustion from work. "This new client is driving me crazy," she would say. "Once this campaign launches, things will go back to normal." But they never did. I'm not proud of what I did next, but desperation drives people to do things they never thought they would. One evening, when Sarah was supposedly at a late meeting, I checked our shared computer. She had forgotten to log out of her email account. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the mouse, debating whether I should invade her privacy. In the end, curiosity and fear won. What I found shattered my world. There were dozens of emails between Sarah and someone named Michael. They weren't just friendly exchanges, they were intimate, filled with words of longing and plans to meet. According to the emails, Michael was a client at her firm, and their professional relationship had turned into something much more personal about 7 months ago. My hands trembled as I scrolled through their correspondence. They had been meeting at a hotel downtown every Tuesday and Thursday, the days Sarah claimed to be working late. There were photos they had exchanged, words of affection that made my stomach turn, and worst of all, discussions about a future together. I felt like I was drowning, gasping for air that wouldn't come. How could she do this? How could the woman I loved, the one I had built a life with, betray me so completely? I sat there for hours, reading through their exchanges, each word driving the knife deeper into my heart. When Sarah came home that night, I almost confronted her. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to make her feel a fraction of the pain that was consuming me. But something held me back. A small, rational part of my brain whispered that I needed more information before confronting her. I needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal. So I pretended everything was normal. I kissed her cheek when she walked through the door, asked about her day, and acted as if my world hadn't just imploded. It was the hardest performance of my life. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Exhausting," she replied, setting down her bag. "But we finally nailed down the concept for the campaign." Another lie. According to the emails, she had been with Michael at their usual hotel. I nodded and smiled, bile rising in my throat. That night, as Sarah slept peacefully beside me, I made a decision. I wouldn't confront her yet. I would gather more evidence, understand the full picture, and then decide what to do. It wasn't just about confirming my suspicions anymore. It was about reclaiming some control in a situation where I felt utterly powerless. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own marriage. I noted Sarah's patterns, the days she claimed to work late, the weekends she spent with friends. I checked credit card statements and found charges from hotels and restaurants I had never been to. I even found receipts for gifts in her purse, presents that were never given to me. Each discovery was a fresh wound, but I kept my composure. During the day, I went to work, performed my duties, and maintained a facade of normalcy. At night, I lay awake, my mind racing with questions and scenarios. How long had this been going on? Was I not enough for her? Had she ever truly loved me, or was our entire relationship built on lies? I considered hiring a private investigator, but decided against it. This was personal, and as painful as it was, I needed to uncover the truth myself. I needed to see it with my own eyes. One Tuesday afternoon, I told my boss I wasn't feeling well and left work early. Instead of going home, I drove to the hotel mentioned in the emails. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might break through my chest as I parked across the street and waited. At 5:30 p.m., Sarah's car pulled into the hotel parking lot. She stepped out, looking around cautiously before entering the building. 20 minutes later, another car arrived, and a man I didn't recognize, tall, with dark hair and an expensive suit, walked into the hotel. I didn't need to see more to know it was Michael. I sat in my car for hours, frozen in place, watching the entrance of the hotel. At 8:45 p.m., they both emerged, sharing a quick kiss before parting ways. Sarah checked her phone as she walked to her car, probably seeing the text I had sent earlier asking when she'd be home. She replied while driving away, "Meeting running late. Don't wait up. Love you." Those 3 words, once so precious, now felt like a cruel joke. I drove home in a daze, tears streaming down my face, the evidence of her betrayal now undeniable. When Sarah came home that night, I was pretending to be asleep. She slipped into bed beside me, and I could smell another man's cologne on her skin. It took every ounce of self-control not to confront her then and there. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. For another week, I lived this double life. A husband by day, a heartbroken investigator by night. I gathered more evidence, saved emails, took photos of receipts, and even followed them once more to confirm their routine. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. But I needed to be thorough. I needed to be certain. The breaking point came unexpectedly. It was a Sunday morning, and we were having breakfast together, a rare occurrence given our busy schedules, or rather, given Sarah's secret rendezvous. She was unusually cheerful, talking about a work conference she had to attend the following weekend. "It's in Chicago," she said, spreading jam on her toast. "I'll be gone from Friday to Sunday. The firm is sending a few of us to represent the company." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. "Sounds important." "It is," she replied, not meeting my eyes. "A great opportunity to network and learn from industry leaders." I knew she was lying. I had seen the emails. There was no conference in Chicago. She and Michael had planned a weekend getaway, a romantic escape from their everyday lives and responsibilities. From me, something inside me snapped. The facade I had carefully maintained crumbled, and the words spilled out before I could stop them. There's no conference, is there, Sarah? She froze, her toast halfway to her mouth. What are you talking about? The trip to Chicago, I said, my voice eerily calm. It's not for work, it's with Michael. The color drained from her face. She set down her toast slowly, her hand trembling. Daniel, I don't know what you're... Please, I interrupted, my voice breaking. Please don't lie to me anymore. I know everything. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. Sarah's eyes darted around, as if looking for an escape route. Finally, she looked at me, her expression a mix of shock, guilt, and something else. Relief, perhaps, that the deception was over. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough, I replied. Long enough to see that our marriage means nothing to you. That's not true, she protested, tears welling in her eyes. You don't understand. Then help me understand, Sarah, I said, leaning forward. Help me understand how you could betray me like this, how you could lie to my face day after day. What followed was a confession that ripped my heart to shreds. Sarah admitted to the affair with Michael, which had been going on for 7 months. She claimed it started innocently, just drinks after work to discuss a campaign, but quickly evolved into something more. She said she felt neglected in our marriage, that I was always busy with work, that we had grown apart. I never meant to hurt you, she said through tears. I was confused and lonely. And what about now? I asked, my voice hollow. Are you still confused? She hesitated, and in that moment of silence, I had my answer. I think I'm in love with him, she finally whispered. Those words were the final blow. Everything I had built my life around, everything I thought was real, crumbled to dust. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. Daniel, please. Sarah reached for my hand, but I pulled away. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. I looked at her, this woman I had loved with all my heart and felt nothing but a numbing emptiness. There's nothing to work through, Sarah. You've made your choice. I walked out of the kitchen and locked myself in our home office. I could hear Sarah crying on the other side of the door, pleading for me to come out, to talk to her. But I was done talking. I was done listening to lies. That day, I made the decision that would change both our lives forever. In the days that followed, Sarah and I existed in a state of uncomfortable cohabitation. She canceled her trip to Chicago, claiming she needed to focus on our marriage. She suggested counseling, promised to end things with Michael, and begged for a second chance. But the trust was broken beyond repair, and I couldn't bring myself to believe anything she said. While she was at work, I consulted with a divorce attorney, a stern woman named Patricia, who listened to my story with practiced empathy. She advised me on the legal process, the division of assets, and the steps I needed to take to protect myself. Given the infidelity, Patricia said, you're in a strong position, but we need to document everything. I showed her the evidence I had gathered, the emails, the receipts, the photos. She nodded approvingly. This is good, but we need more. Financial records, text messages, anything that shows the extent of the affair and any shared expenses. For the next 2 weeks, I played along with Sarah's attempts at reconciliation. We ate dinner together, watched TV side by side, and even attended one counseling session. All the while, I was finalizing my exit strategy. I moved most of my personal belongings to a storage unit when she wasn't home. I opened a separate bank account and transferred half of our savings. I found an apartment downtown and signed a 6-month lease. Sarah seemed to believe that we were working things out. She was attentive, affectionate, and seemingly transparent. She showed me her phone, gave me access to her email, and came home directly after work. But it was too late. The damage was done, and my decision was made. What hurt the most wasn't just the affair. It was the realization that I no longer knew who Sarah was. The woman I had married, the one I had shared my dreams and fears with, had become a stranger. How could I ever trust her again? How could I look at her and not see the betrayal? One evening, as we sat in uncomfortable silence watching a show neither of us was paying attention to, Sarah turned to me with hopeful eyes. "Do you think we'll be okay?" she asked, her voice small. I looked at her, studying the face I had once known better than my own. "I don't know," I said honestly. It was the first truth I had told her in weeks. She nodded, taking my hand in hers. "I'm willing to fight for us, Daniel. I made a terrible mistake, but I love you. I've always loved you." I didn't pull my hand away, but I didn't squeeze hers either. I just let it lie there, lifeless. Sometimes love isn't enough, I said softly. That night, as Sarah slept, I finalized my plan. The divorce papers were ready, and Patricia had advised me on the best course of action. It wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. I needed to end things on my terms, not hers. The day I chose to deliver the divorce papers was significant. It was our 8th wedding anniversary. Sarah had mentioned wanting to celebrate, to use the occasion as a fresh start. She had made reservations at the same Italian restaurant where I had proposed, a gesture that seemed more cruel than romantic given the circumstances. I dressed for work as usual that morning, kissed Sarah goodbye as if everything was normal, and told her I was looking forward to dinner. She beamed at me, relief and hope washing over her face. It's going to be a special night, she promised. A new beginning for us. I smiled and nodded, knowing it would be an ending instead. After she left, I returned to the house and collected the last of my essential belongings. I placed my wedding ring on the bedside table, along with a letter explaining my decision. It wasn't a hateful letter. I didn't want to part with more bitterness than necessary. It simply outlined why I couldn't continue in a marriage built on lies and betrayal. At noon, I drove to Sarah's office building, a sleek high-rise in the heart of downtown. I had never visited her workplace before, another red flag I had missed. She had always insisted on keeping our professional lives separate. Now I understood why. The receptionist smiled warmly when I approached the desk. "How can I help you?" "I'm here to see Sarah Walsh," I said, using her professional name. "I'm her husband, Daniel." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, I didn't realize Sarah was married. Let me call her for you." That statement hit me like a punch to the gut. Sarah had never mentioned me at work. She had erased me from her professional life, making it easier to pursue her affair with Michael. "Actually," I said, composing myself, "I'd like to surprise her. It's our anniversary." The receptionist hesitated, then smiled conspiratorially. "That's so sweet. She's in a meeting right now, but it should be ending soon. Her office is on the 10th floor, last door on the left." I thanked her and took the elevator up, the manila envelope containing the divorce papers heavy in my hand. When the doors opened on the 10th floor, I was greeted by an open office space with glass-walled conference rooms along the perimeter. I spotted Sarah immediately, sitting in one of these rooms, engaged in what appeared to be a serious discussion with several colleagues. And there, sitting across from her, was Michael. He was leaning toward her, speaking animatedly. And Sarah was nodding, a smile playing on her lips. Even in a professional setting, the connection between them was palpable. I stood there for a moment, watching them through the glass. Two people engaged in a relationship that had destroyed my world. They hadn't noticed me yet, and I considered turning around, delivering the papers another way. But I had come this far. I needed to see this through. As if sensing my presence, Sarah looked up. Our eyes met, and her expression shifted from surprise to confusion to panic in a matter of seconds. She said something to the group and stood up abruptly, hurrying out of the conference room. "Daniel," she said breathlessly, approaching me. "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I looked past her to where Michael was now standing, watching us with obvious concern. "I wanted to give you something," I said, holding out the envelope. "Happy anniversary, Sarah." She took it hesitantly, her face pale. "What is this?" "Divorce papers," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I think it's time we both stopped pretending." The shock on her face would have been satisfying if it wasn't so painful to witness. She clutched the envelope to her chest, her eyes darting between me and the conference room, where her colleagues and Michael were now openly staring. "Here? Now?" she whispered harshly. "You're doing this at my workplace?" "I thought it was fitting," I replied, "considering this is where it all started." Michael had stepped out of the conference room and was approaching cautiously. Sarah shot him a warning look, but he continued toward us. "Is everything all right?" he asked, his voice deep and confident. Up close, I could see he was older than me, maybe late 40s, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of polished appearance that comes with wealth and status. "Everything's fine," Sarah said quickly. "Daniel was just leaving." I looked at Michael, this man who had been sleeping with my wife, who had been planning a future with her while I remained oblivious. I should have felt hatred, rage, a desire to lash out. Instead, I felt a strange sense of pity. "You're welcome to her," I said simply. Michael had the decency to look ashamed. He took a step back, mumbling something about giving us privacy. "Please, Daniel," Sarah pleaded, tears welling in her eyes. "Not here. Let's talk about this at home." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said. "I've said everything I needed to in the letter. The apartment is yours until the lease is up. I've already moved out." The realization that I had been planning this, that I had already left without her knowing, seemed to hit her harder than the divorce papers themselves. "You've been planning this all along?" she asked, her voice breaking. "All those counseling sessions, the dinners, the talks about working things out, it was all a lie?" The irony of her accusing me of lying wasn't lost on me, but I didn't point it out. "I needed time to sort things out," I said, "and I deserved the chance to end things on my terms, not yours." By now, a small crowd had gathered, pretending to work but obviously eavesdropping. Sarah noticed and tried to pull me toward an empty office, but I stood my ground. "I'm done, Sarah," I said finitely. "Good luck with your new life." I turned and walked toward the elevator, ignoring Sarah calling my name behind me. As the doors closed, I caught a glimpse of her standing there, the envelope clutched in her hands, Michael by her side, both looking shell-shocked. It wasn't the closure I had imagined when I first discovered the affair. It wasn't triumphant or satisfying. It was just sad, the end of something that had once been beautiful, now tarnished beyond recognition. But as the elevator descended, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The deception was over. The pretending was over. I could finally start to heal. The immediate aftermath of my dramatic delivery was chaotic. Sarah called incessantly, leaving tearful voicemails begging me to talk to her. She showed up at my new apartment, though I have no idea how she found the address. I refused to see her. She sent emails, text messages, even a handwritten letter apologizing and pleading for another chance. I maintained my silence. I had said all I needed to say. Friends and family were shocked by our sudden separation. Most didn't know about Sarah's affair, and I didn't feel the need to broadcast it. When asked, I simply said we had grown apart, that some differences couldn't be reconciled. Some believed me. Others suspected there was more to the story. It didn't matter. I was done living my life for others' perceptions. Michael reached out to me once, a carefully worded email expressing regret for his role in the situation. I deleted it without responding. His guilt was his to bear, not mine to absolve. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. Sarah didn't contest anything, agreeing to all my terms without argument. We divided our assets equitably, sold the house, and went our separate ways. The final paperwork was signed 4 months after I delivered the divorce papers to her office. On the day the divorce was finalized, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the signed documents. 8 years of marriage reduced to legal jargon and signatures. I expected to feel something profound: grief, relief, anger, something. Instead, I felt oddly empty, as if I was watching someone else's life unfold. That emptiness was the hardest part of the whole ordeal. The anger I could handle. The sadness had its place. But the void left by the loss of the future I had imagined was almost unbearable. The children we had planned to have, the house we had bought together, the retirement we had discussed, all gone, replaced by uncertainty and solitude. I threw myself into work, taking on extra projects and volunteering for overtime. I exercised religiously, running every morning until my lungs burned and my legs ached. I reconnected with old friends and made new ones. I did everything I could to fill the void, to outrun the emptiness. But at night, when the distractions faded and silence settled around me, the reality of my situation would crash back in. I would lie awake, wondering where I had gone wrong, if there had been signs I missed before the obvious ones, if there was anything I could have done differently. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Sarah at a coffee shop downtown. It was a random encounter, the kind of coincidence that seems too contrived for real life. I was grabbing a quick lunch, and she was picking up coffee. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, we both froze, uncertain of the protocol for this unexpected meeting. She approached my table hesitantly. "Hi, Daniel." "Sarah," I acknowledged, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. It was a courtesy I wasn't sure I wanted to extend, but it felt like the mature thing to do. She sat down, clutching her coffee cup like a lifeline. She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes and a new, shorter haircut. "How have you been?" she asked. "I'm okay," I replied honestly. "Working a lot? You?" She nodded, her eyes darting around nervously. "Same. Busy with work." A pause. "I'm not with Michael anymore." I hadn't asked, and I wasn't sure why she felt the need to share this information. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. "Don't be," she said with a bitter laugh. It turns out he wasn't looking for anything serious. Once the excitement of sneaking around wore off, he lost interest. There was a time when this revelation would have filled me with vindictive satisfaction. Now, it just added to the general sadness of the situation. That's tough. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time since sitting down. "I made a horrible mistake, Daniel. I threw away the best thing in my life for something that wasn't real." I sighed, setting down my sandwich. "Sarah, don't—" "I'm not asking for another chance," she interrupted, raising a hand. "I know that's not possible. I just want you to know that I understand what I lost, and I'm sorry, truly sorry." I studied her face, searching for signs of the woman I had once loved with all my heart. She was still there, beneath the regret and exhaustion, but she was a stranger to me now. "I appreciate that," I said finally. "I hope you find happiness, Sarah. I really do." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "You too, Daniel. You deserve it more than anyone." She stood to leave, hesitated, then leaned down to kiss my cheek softly. "Goodbye, Daniel." I watched her walk away, a familiar figure growing increasingly distant. It felt like a second goodbye, but this one was gentler, less traumatic. It felt like closure. Healing from betrayal isn't a linear process. There are good days and bad days, moments of progress followed by unexpected setbacks. For every step forward, there seemed to be two steps back. The hardest part was learning to trust again, not just others, but myself. I questioned my judgment, my ability to read people, my worthiness of honest love. If I had been so wrong about Sarah, the person I thought I knew better than anyone, how could I trust my perceptions of anyone else? 6 months after the divorce, my friend Jake convinced me to join a rock climbing group. It was completely outside my comfort zone. I had always been more of a runner than a climber, but that was precisely why I agreed. I needed new experiences, ones not tainted by memories of my marriage. The group met every Saturday morning at an indoor climbing facility. On my first day, I was paired with an instructor named Olivia, a petite woman with a shock of curly red hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "First time?" she asked, helping me into the harness. "Is it that obvious?" I replied with a self-conscious laugh. "Everyone's a beginner sometime," she said with a shrug. "The key is to trust the rope, trust your partner, and most importantly, trust yourself." It sounded like advice that extended beyond climbing, and I wondered if she somehow knew my story. But of course, she didn't. To her, I was just another nervous first-timer. Under Olivia's guidance, I learned the basics of rock climbing. I fell numerous times, dangling from the rope as my muscles screamed in protest. But with each attempt, I climbed a little higher, stayed on the wall a little longer. The focus required left no room for dwelling on the past. It was just me, the wall, and the next handhold. After a few weeks, I found myself looking forward to Saturday mornings. The physical challenge was invigorating, but more than that, the community was welcoming. These people didn't know me as half of a failed marriage. They knew me as Daniel, the software engineer who was surprisingly good at problem-solving routes, but terrible at maintaining his grip. One Saturday, after a particularly challenging climb, Olivia and I sat on a bench, catching our breath. "You've improved a lot," she said, offering me a water bottle. "Thanks," I replied, taking a grateful sip. "It helps to have a good teacher." She smiled, and for the first time I noticed the small dimple in her right cheek. "Want to grab coffee?" she asked casually. "There's a great place around the corner." I hesitated, old fears surfacing. Was this a date? Was I ready for that? What if I misjudged her intentions? "Just coffee," Olivia added, seeming to sense my uncertainty. "No pressure." I found myself nodding. "Coffee sounds good." One coffee led to another, which led to lunch the following weekend, which led to dinner the week after that. Olivia was easy to talk to, direct without being harsh, patient without being passive. She had her own past. a broken engagement 3 years ago that had left her wary of commitment. But she spoke about it openly, without the bitterness I sometimes heard in my own voice when discussing Sarah. 4 months into our friendship, it wasn't quite dating, but it wasn't just friendship either. I finally told Olivia the full story of my marriage and its end. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sunset, when the conversation turned to past relationships. "You don't talk much about your ex-wife," she observed, nursing a glass of wine. "No, I guess I don't," I acknowledged. "You don't have to," she assured me. "We all have stories we'd rather not revisit." But something about the moment, the setting sun casting long shadows, the gentle breeze, the comfortable silence between us, made me want to share. So I did. I told her everything: the discovery, the investigation, the dramatic delivery of divorce papers. I didn't paint myself as a hero or Sarah as a villain. I just told the truth as I had experienced it. When I finished, Olivia was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached over and took my hand, her calloused palm rough against mine. "Thank you for trusting me with that," she said simply. "Thank you for listening," I replied. She nodded, then asked, "Do you regret it, the way you ended things?" I considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," I admitted. "It was theatrical and maybe unnecessary. But at the time, it felt like the only way I could reclaim some control in a situation where I had felt completely powerless." "I get that," Olivia said. "When Jack, my ex-fiancé, called off our wedding, I changed the locks on our apartment while he was at work and left his stuff on the sidewalk. Not my proudest moment." We both laughed, a shared understanding of the irrational things people do when hurt. "How did you move past it?" I asked. "The betrayal, the loss of trust." Olivia sighed, looking out at the darkening sky. "Time, mostly, and realizing that one person's actions don't define what all relationships will be like. Jack was dishonest, but that doesn't mean everyone will be." It was a simple truth, one I had heard before, but coming from Olivia, someone who had experienced similar pain, it carried more weight. "Also," she added with a small smile, "rock climbing helped. It's hard to worry about the past when you're 50 feet up a wall, trying not to fall." I laughed, squeezing her hand. "I've noticed that." That night marked a turning point. I didn't magically forget what had happened with Sarah, but I started to see it as a chapter in my life, not the whole story. And for the first time since the divorce, I allowed myself to imagine a future that included someone else. My relationship with Olivia progressed slowly, both of us cautious about rushing into something we weren't ready for. We continued climbing together, exploring the city, and spending quiet evenings talking about everything and nothing. We had disagreements. She was more spontaneous than me, I was more structured than her. But we talked through them openly, a novel experience after the secrets and lies of my marriage. A year after our first coffee, Olivia was offered a job as the head instructor at a prestigious climbing facility in Denver. It was an incredible opportunity, one that aligned perfectly with her career goals. She told me about it over dinner, her excitement evident in her animated gestures and bright eyes. "It's a 2-year contract," she explained. "The facility is state-of-the-art, and they're looking to expand their training programs." "That's amazing, Liv," I said, genuinely happy for her. "When do they need your answer?" "By the end of the month," she replied, her smile fading slightly. "It's a big decision." I nodded, understanding the unspoken question. We hadn't defined our relationship in concrete terms, hadn't made any long-term commitments. Would this opportunity mean the end of whatever we had built? "What are you thinking?" I asked, wanting to hear her thoughts before sharing mine. She fidgeted with her napkin. "I'm thinking I want this job. I've worked hard for an opportunity like this." A pause. "But I also don't want to lose you." The ball was in my court, and I knew whatever I said next would shape the future of our relationship. A few years ago, I would have been hesitant to uproot my life for a relationship, especially after what happened with Sarah. But Olivia wasn't Sarah, and I wasn't the same person I had been then. "My company has an office in Boulder," I said carefully. "It's about 30 minutes from Denver. I could request a transfer." Olivia's eyes widened. "You would do that? Move to Colorado?" "For the right reasons, yes," I replied honestly. "My work can be done from anywhere with an internet connection, and I think building a life with you is a pretty good reason." The smile that spread across her face was worth any uncertainty I might have felt. Are you sure? I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not saying we should move in together right away or rush into anything. We can take it slow, see how things develop, but I don't want distance to be the reason we don't try. 2 months later, I was unpacking boxes in a small apartment in Boulder, about 25 minutes from Olivia's new place in Denver. My company had been supportive of the transfer, especially since I had been a loyal employee for almost a decade. I kept my same team, just worked remotely, with occasional trips to the office in Boulder. The move was both terrifying and exhilarating. I was leaving behind the city where I had spent my entire adult life, the place filled with memories both good and bad. But there was something freeing about starting fresh in a new place, one untainted by the ghosts of my past. Olivia thrived in her new role, quickly becoming a respected figure in the local climbing community. I settled into a routine, balancing work with exploring my new surroundings. We saw each other several times a week, gradually integrating our lives without losing our individual identities. One weekend, about 6 months after the move, Olivia convinced me to try outdoor climbing for the first time. We drove to a popular spot in Clear Creek Canyon, the autumn leaves painting the landscape in vibrant reds and golds. Are you sure I'm ready for this? I asked, eyeing the imposing rock face with trepidation. Absolutely, Olivia replied confidently, securing our equipment. This is a beginner route, and I'll be with you every step of the way. As I began the climb, feeling the rough texture of real rock beneath my fingers instead of the manufactured holds of the gym, I was struck by the parallel to my life's journey. The path wasn't clear or marked like it was indoors. There were unexpected challenges, moments of uncertainty, and no guaranteed outcome. But there was also breathtaking beauty, a sense of accomplishment with each hard-won progress, and the knowledge that I wasn't facing it alone. When I reached the top, muscles burning and heart racing, the view nearly brought tears to my eyes. The canyon stretched out below, a tapestry of colors and textures, the creek winding through like a silver ribbon. Olivia joined me moments later, her face flushed with exertion and joy. Worth it? She asked, already knowing the answer. Worth it, I confirmed, taking in the panorama. Thank you for pushing me to try. She smiled, that dimple appearing in her right cheek. That's what partners do. Partners. The word settled comfortably between us, a simple acknowledgement of what we had become to each other. That night, as we sat by a campfire, the stars impossibly bright above us, Olivia rested her head on my shoulder. I'm glad you came to Colorado, she said softly. Me too, I replied, wrapping an arm around her. Best decision I've made in a long time. And it was true. Moving across the country for a relatively new relationship might have seemed impulsive to some, but it had been a calculated risk, one taken with open eyes and honest communication. Unlike my marriage to Sarah, which had been built on an idealized version of love, my relationship with Olivia was grounded in reality, in the understanding that we were both flawed individuals choosing to build something together, day by day. 2 years after my move to Colorado, I received an unexpected email. The sender's name made my heart skip a beat, Sarah Walsh. I hadn't heard from her since our coffee shop encounter, and I had no idea how she had gotten my new email address, probably from a mutual friend. I hesitated before opening it, unsure of what emotions it might stir up. But curiosity won out. Dear Daniel, it began. I hope this email finds you well. I've debated for weeks whether to send this, but I felt you deserved to know. I'm getting married next month. His name is Thomas, and he's a good man who knows everything about my past mistakes. I'm not writing to upset you or reopen old wounds, but rather to thank you. As strange as it might sound, the way our marriage ended forced me to confront parts of myself I had been avoiding. The past 2 years have been a journey of self-discovery and growth. I'm not the same person who betrayed you, and I have you to thank in part for that transformation. I hope you found happiness, Daniel. You deserve it more than anyone I know. With sincere gratitude, Sarah. I read the email twice, searching for any hidden agenda or manipulative undertone, but there wasn't one. It seemed like a genuine expression of gratitude and closure. I showed the email to Olivia that evening, curious about her reaction. She read it thoughtfully, then handed the phone back to me. Are you okay? She asked, her voice gentle. I considered the question. Was I upset by the news of Sarah's engagement? Did it stir up old feelings of betrayal or loss? To my surprise, the answer was no. What I felt was a complex mix of emotions. A tinge of melancholy for what might have been, relief that Sarah had apparently found a healthier relationship, and most predominantly, gratitude for the path that had led me to where I was now. I'm okay, I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. I'm happy for her, actually. It sounds like she's done some real soul searching. Olivia nodded, sitting beside me on the couch of our shared apartment. We had moved in together 6 months ago, a deliberate step taken after many conversations about what we both wanted. Are you going to respond? I hesitated. I don't know. Part of me thinks it's better to leave the past in the past. That's valid, Olivia said. But sometimes acknowledging the past helps us fully embrace the present. I thought about her words that night as I lay awake, Olivia sleeping peacefully beside me. The next morning, I composed a brief reply. Sarah, thank you for your email. I appreciate your honesty and the thought it took to reach out. I'm glad to hear you found happiness with Thomas. I wish you both the best. I, too, have found a new path that brings me joy. Take care, Daniel. Simple, honest, and free of bitterness. As I hit send, I felt a sense of completion, as if the final page of a chapter had been turned. That weekend, Olivia and I drove to our favorite spot in the mountains. The weather was perfect, the sky a brilliant blue backdrop to the snow-capped peaks. We hiked to a secluded lookout point, the trail challenging but familiar after numerous visits. As we reached the summit, breathless and exhilarated, Olivia turned to me with an uncharacteristically nervous expression. What's wrong? I asked, concerned. Nothing's wrong, she said, taking a deep breath. Everything's right, actually, which is why I wanted to ask you something. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. My heart began to race as she opened it, revealing a simple band of brushed titanium. Daniel, she said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, these past 2 years have been the most fulfilling of my life. You've taught me that true partnership isn't about perfect compatibility or grand gestures. It's about choosing each other every day, especially on the hard days. I want to keep choosing you if you'll have me. Will you marry me? The proposal caught me completely off guard. We had discussed marriage in abstract terms, agreeing that neither of us was opposed to the institution itself, just to rushing into it. But I hadn't expected this moment, here and now. For a brief, terrifying second, memories of my first marriage flashed through my mind. The proposal, the wedding, the happy years, and then the devastating end. Fear gripped me. Fear of history repeating itself, of trusting too completely, of being wrong again. But as I looked at Olivia, her face open and vulnerable, I realized something profound. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite it. Love isn't a guarantee against pain. It's the belief that the connection is worth the risk. Yes, I said, the word carrying the weight of everything we had built and everything we could be. Yes, I will. The smile that broke across her face was like the sun emerging from behind clouds. She slipped the ring onto my finger, a perfect fit, naturally, and I pulled her into an embrace that felt like coming home. As we stood there, holding each other against the backdrop of the vast Colorado wilderness, I thought about the journey that had led me to this moment. The heartbreak that had nearly broken me, the months of soul-searching and rebuilding, the unexpected encounter that had changed everything. I thought about the man who had stood in Sarah's office 2.5 years ago, divorce papers in hand, believing his capacity for trust and love had been irreparably damaged. That man couldn't have imagined standing here now, heart full and future bright. If I could go back and speak to him, I would tell him that betrayal doesn't define you unless you let it, that the end of one story is merely the beginning of another, that healing isn't about forgetting the pain, but about learning from it, growing beyond it, and eventually finding gratitude for the path it set you on. Because without that painful chapter, I wouldn't be here now, holding the woman who had taught me that love, real love, isn't about blind trust or idealized perfection. It's about seeing each other clearly, flaws and all, and choosing to build something meaningful together anyway. As Olivia and I made our way back down the mountain, hands intertwined, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. The past would always be a part of me, the lessons learned, the growth achieved, the strength discovered. But it no longer defined my future. That future, uncertain but full of possibility, waited for us to write it together, one day at a time. 5 years after delivering divorce papers to Sarah's office, I stood in the backyard of our mountain home, watching as Olivia taught our 3-year-old daughter, Emma, how to identify different types of wildflowers. The afternoon sun filtered through the aspen trees, casting dappled shadows on their matching curly red hair. Our wedding had been small and intimate, held at the climbing spot where Olivia had proposed. We had exchanged vows surrounded by close friends and family, with the mountains as our witnesses. It was nothing like my first wedding, no elaborate reception, no hundreds of guests, but it was perfect in its authenticity. I had learned that happiness rarely looks like we expect it to. Sometimes it comes disguised as heartbreak, as endings we didn't choose, as painful truths we didn't want to face. But if we're brave enough to walk through the darkness, to keep moving forward even when the path ahead is unclear, we often find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be. Sarah and I had no contact beyond that brief email exchange. Occasionally, I heard updates through mutual friends. She and Thomas were still married. They had a son. They had moved to California for her new job. I wished her well, genuinely, but our lives had diverged completely, as they should have. Olivia looked up and caught me watching them, a knowing smile crossing her face. She whispered something to Emma, who giggled and ran toward me with a small bouquet of purple and yellow flowers clutched in her tiny hand. "For you, Daddy," she exclaimed, holding up her treasure. I crouched down to accept the gift, my heart swelling with a love I never knew existed until she came into our lives. "Thank you, sweet pea. They're beautiful." Emma beamed, then raced back to Olivia to continue their botanical exploration. I watched them, these two remarkable humans who had become the center of my world, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Life had not gone according to plan, my plan, at least. But maybe that was the point. Maybe our plans, with all their careful consideration and logical progression, pale in comparison to the messy, unpredictable reality of life as it unfolds. Maybe the most beautiful destinations are the ones we never thought to include on our maps. That day in Sarah's office, delivering divorce papers with trembling hands and a broken heart, I thought I was ending a chapter of my life. What I didn't realize was that I was actually beginning a new book entirely, one with unexpected twists and turns, moments of breathtaking beauty and profound connection, challenges that would test me, and triumphs that would transform me. And as I stood there in the mountain clearing, watching my wife and daughter amidst the wildflowers, I knew without a doubt that this story, this imperfect, unplanned, beautiful story, was exactly the one I was meant to live. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals lead us exactly where we need to go. Not immediately, not painlessly, but eventually. And when we look back from the vantage point of a life rebuilt, we might just find that what once seemed like the end was actually the beginning of something far more authentic and profound than we ever dared to imagine. My cheating wife thought I'd never find out until I dropped the divorce papers at her work. And in that moment of apparent ending, a new beginning was already taking root, waiting for me to find the courage to nurture it into existence. Life doesn't always give us what we want. Sometimes it gives us what we need instead. And sometimes, if we're truly fortunate, what we need turns out to be more beautiful than anything we could have wanted for ourselves. As Emma ran back to me with another handful of flowers, her laughter echoing through the clearing, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And for that, paradoxical as it might seem, I had a failed marriage and a painful betrayal to thank. In the end, it wasn't about winning or losing, about revenge or vindication. It was about finding the strength to keep believing in love, even when it had wounded me deeply. It was about learning that trust isn't about certainty, it's about courage. And it was about discovering that sometimes the most painful endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And that, perhaps, is the greatest lesson of all. And that's the end of the story. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section. I'll definitely read and reply to your comments. See you soon in the next video. Until then, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.